All right, let's go ahead and get started. We don't have a whole lot of material tonight, so we'll go ahead and plow through it. So tonight we're going to talk about writing, and we're going to use a lot of the same principles that we talked about with clarity, conclusion, getting straight to the point, guiding your audience with various cues that we did when we made presentations orally. We're going to use a lot of those same concepts for writing. And I'm going to show you a style of writing that you can use in a very adaptable way. You can adapt the techniques we're going to go over for this particular format to so many other purposes. We'll go over this thesis subheading format. I'll explain how it works, how I grade it, how you can do a good job at it. I'll explain the two assignments that will be relevant to. And then we will move on with a brief discussion of emails and memos, centered mostly around a memo assignment that's going to be due for you in, I believe, 2 weeks. That'll be it. So we'll go over the thesis subheading format for writing, and then we'll go over the corporate memo assignment and how to be successful on that. So let's do it. All right, writing. So, of course, when I tell you to write, I'm going to tell you to write conclusions, just like when I tell you to stand up and make a presentation, I want to hear conclusions. I want you, as the talented business professional, to tell me the takeaway. Conclusions, another word for conclusion in writing is thesis. I'm sure you've all heard thesis before. It's the main point. It's the thing you're writing about. And you want that to be as concise as possible in writing, just as you want it to be as concise and clear as possible when you're speaking. So thesis, short statement, summarizes the main point of the essay. This is our finding, our proposal, conclusion, point, opinion. All right? Our opinion is that this is what we want to say about in this written document. All right, so with that, with the thesis being the thing that we want to frame, I'm going to show you this thesis and subheading framework. This was designed by the former head of business communications at Rutgers, Carter Daniel. He since retired and passed away, but it wasn't developed years and years ago. It was like, I don't know, 10 years ago he developed this, and this is a great, great way of making your points clear. And I'm going to include some elements that I'm sure you're familiar with and put it together in a way where you can write a concise one-page document, clearly illustrating this, whatever thesis that you're trying to illustrate. The components are going to include a title, which we'll go over all this. Just let me give you the outline. Title, a thesis, obviously. A thesis paragraph, which is going to house the thesis. Subheadings, which we'll talk about, visually give your audience cues. Subheading paragraphs underneath each of those subheadings. And topic sentences. Okay, so let me jump right in with an example, and then I'll break down each of those, how I want you to construct the title, the subheadings, the thesis paragraph, etc., etc. So suppose you're going to write something like this. You're going to write a memo that suggests recommended organizational changes. And suppose you work in the healthcare industry, and you've got some ideas for your company that will help them be more competitive in the healthcare industry. So you might intrigue your audience with a title that gives them an idea of context. This first paragraph, you might guess, is what we're going to call the thesis paragraph. It could also be called an introduction. It could also be called an executive summary. What Carter Daniel called it was the thesis paragraph, and we'll just use that term. This thesis paragraph is going to warm us up a little bit to this topic, and it's going to contain the thesis, the key thing we want to state in this written document. So let me just read through the top paragraph to give us a sense of that. So as an industry, pharmaceutical research is constantly evolving and pioneering new discoveries that help patients overcome disease. In order to remain competitive in this environment, our company's structure must be able to support a flexible workforce. To support a flexible workforce, I recommend that we flatten our organizational structure, consolidate departments, and deploy an electronic notebook. So just having read the title, having read a short paragraph, you have a pretty clear idea of where this writer is going. In addition to that, if you don't already, this writer has given us subheadings. Right? And each of those three key points, there is a subheading reflecting that. Flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, deploy electronic notebook. Under each of those, you may have guessed, there's going to be a subheading paragraph expanding on that. Starting each of the subheading paragraphs is a topic sentence for each paragraph. Have you all heard of topic sentence? Fairly straightforward grammatical English concept where the first sentence will give you a preview of the entire paragraph. So in this format, we have so many different things that are going to quickly cue your audience in to the point you're trying to make, but also give you an opportunity to expand further if you need to get more complicated with any of these particular ideas. So that's the overview. Now let's break down each one individually. Title. Engage, informs the audience. It's going to provide context for us. It may or may not contain the thesis. Some titles will just, boom, hit you with it. There's our thesis. There's the main point of this essay. But it could be just something that intrigues you. So something to build context for us, get the reader excited. That's our title. Thesis paragraph. I mentioned this could be called an introduction. You may have called it an executive summary in the past, but we'll just call it a thesis paragraph. What it does is it warms up our audience for the thesis, provides the necessary context as we might need it as the reader. And it will, of course, contain the one-sentence thesis statement, which is the one sentence, clearly, this is what I'm trying to say in this essay. The thesis statement will also allude to those subheadings. Remember the example I just gave, or I just showed, where someone was recommending organizational changes and there were 3 things? That subheading order should be obvious in the thesis statement. So we don't want to say we want to flatten organizational structure or deploy electronic notebook and then switch the order around when we get further in the paper. We want that order to be clear from the very beginning. Okay. All right, I already read you this thesis paragraph example. Wait, what do I do? All right, so we warm up the audience with the context, pharmaceutical research. We say what we need to do to become competitive, or say that we want to become competitive, and then this last paragraph just jumps out at us. To support a flexible workforce, I recommend that we flatten our organizational structure, consolidate departments, and deploy an electronic notebook. So this particular style of writing is all designed for clarity. We're not trying to be suspenseful about anything that we reveal. It's just a chance to be crystal clear with some of the writing techniques that I'm sure you're familiar with, I'm sure you've used in the past. But as business students, we don't usually get extra points for writing longer works. Our audience wants us to be succinct and to the point. And we can get succinct and to the point right in that first paragraph. Subheadings. Predictable, as I mentioned. Let me go back a minute. You see we've got the recommendation. I recommend flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, deploy an electronic notebook. Those are going to be our subheadings. We want those crystal clear in that thesis statement. And we don't want to change the order, like I mentioned. Predictable. That's what we mean by predictable. We want everything to be working together with the way we construct that statement and then the way we actually visually represent them. Parallel structure. We've talked about parallel structure in the past, but we want to revisit it now because it can be particularly important for writing. Can someone remind us what parallel structure is? Dan.
The context you mentioned today was when you listed the bullet points on your slides. I guess the action and whatever it was. They looked parallel to each other.
Yeah, they're each the same part of speech. They're each a noun, they're each a verb. If you have a verb and then a noun, you might want to stay consistent in that regard. So parallel structure just technically means the same part of speech in each of your subheadings. Concise. We want these subheadings to be concise, It's going to defeat the purpose if we have a sentence-long subheading. The point of this subheading is to quickly guide our reader to our main purpose and our main point. And the more we can think about how we can boil that down to the essence that we want to represent with a subheading, the clearer our paper, our essay is going to be. So, I gave away the punchline here already. We've got the thesis statement clearly laid out here. Guess what the subheadings are going to be? Flatten organizational structure, consolidate departments, deploy electronic notebook. So, flatten is a verb, consolidate is a verb, deploy is a verb, followed by nouns. Yes, we have a two-word noun here. If we wanted to be sticklers, we could say maybe there's a way you could make that more parallel, but I'm happy that each of them start with a verb and are followed by some sort of noun. Let me do some parallel structure examples just to make sure we're clear on that. So here's a few things. Look at them, decide whether or not they are in parallel structure, and we'll think about how that might help or hurt the writer trying to make her or his point. All right, for example, an objective, and I use this from, as an objective, when you have an objective when you're making a presentation, it forces us to try, monitor, adjusting as necessary. Are those in parallel structure? No. It's the last one throws us for a loop. We don't want that one. We want something like this. An objective forces us to try, monitor, adjust. Clear, succinct, easy on the eye, easy on the brain. Right? Believe me, when you're grading 20 of these, you want papers that are easy on the brain, easy to process. Not just because someone will be grading your paper, but because someone will be reading your writing and trying to get something valuable out of it and wondering, who is this person in whatever department? Why are they writing this? Why are they sending me this memo? Oh, it's crystal clear. It just jumps out at me, and I can read more as necessary. In fact, I want to get this person in my conference room to make a more in-depth presentation about this. It's so interesting. Another example. Examine facts. Question witnesses. Present recommendations. Parallel structure. Yeah. Another example. Italy. France. Brooklyn. Parallel structure. It's kind of a weird violation of parallel structure. They are technically all nouns, but it makes the reader scratch their head and say, wait, how does Brooklyn fit in with Italy and France? I'm confused, but then I thought the title was something else. Don't make your reader work hard. Okay, moving on. Topic sentence. Topic sentence is one sentence at the beginning of a paragraph, which is like a mini thesis, which explains the whole point of the rest of the paragraph. Typically, you'll want to put a topic sentence as the first sentence. Doesn't necessarily have to be. An English professor, an English teacher will tell you maybe you could put it in the middle, the end, to build up to it. But I would say just put it at the first sentence. Use it as the first sentence. You don't want to get tricky with any weird literary devices. You want clarity in your writing as business professionals. So I would practice for this class. Topic sentence is the first sentence of the paragraph, followed by a further explanation of that. Sentence expresses the main idea of the paragraph in which it occurs. Mini thesis, so like a mini thesis for that paragraph. Usually the first sentence. I'd recommend in this class definitely the first sentence. What do I have here? A subheading paragraph example. Okay, so we're still on the same piece of writing, and now we're on the first subheading, where the reader is going to explain flattening the organizational structure. This first sentence, we hope, is going to be a topic sentence which is going to guide us. Let's read it briefly. So first, we must flatten our organizational structure in order to allow our scientists to make decisions faster. Our current hierarchy, and it goes on. That first sentence, I'm going to tell you, yes, that's a topic sentence. And would you agree with me that that sounds like an overview of something broader? All right. So we've got so many things working for us at this point. Already we've got a title that provides context, engages our reader. We've got a succinct thesis paragraph, which continues to build that context and has a crystal clear thesis, so our reader knows where we're going. We've indicated subheadings. We've got subheadings. And then in each of those subheadings, we've got this topic sentence, which is going to overview that paragraph. Now, what I like about this, especially after we get through the topic sentence, is if we need to get more complicated, if we need to go into more in-depth language, we need to present some examples which show a different level of sophistication, all these cues give us permission to do that. In my mind, if we've made our point so clear and guided our reader so precisely, that's when we can get more complicated, because we don't run the same risk of losing our reader. We don't run the same risk of annoying our reader if they're not understanding where we're going. So this format allows us to get into more depth if we need to. All right, questions? Good. Okay, so I guess that's it, right? We've got, as I mentioned, our title, thesis paragraph, clear thesis, subheadings in predictable order and parallel structure. Each of these subheadings have a paragraph which contain a thesis, can contain a topic sentence, and below that topic sentence we can get into more depth as necessary. Now, I just really like this type of writing. I've taught it since I started at Rutgers 2 years ago and learned about it from the former head of the business communications department. I didn't hear about it from him, I read his book. And it's so refreshing to read someone who has written in this clarity. And it's not just me, because it makes it easier for me to grade. I've just looked for these types of techniques in anything I've read. And I appreciate it so much when I'm able to clearly understand where the writer is going. I feel like I used to have an impression that writing, or reading rather, was something that you needed to tolerate reading hundreds of pages as an undergrad. Maybe you're reading a poli-sci book or a history book. You need to pick through and try to determine what the reader is trying to tell you. And I love so much that we're in an environment where we're writing business memos, where clarity and succinct writing is rewarded. And at the same time, we're trying to think about how we can best help our audience. And that audience could be a variety of people. It could be a corporate executive with a lot on her or his plate who wants to know, what are you getting at? What is valuable about this? It could be, for me, as I'm just trying to understand where you're going with this memo. Now, I'll mention this little anecdote about grading, but I'll just mention it and then I'll deal with it later. It's not the most important thing. Grades are not everything. Grades are just an indication. But if I read a paper that is written clearly in this format, it takes me maybe 30 to 60 seconds to read it and grade it, because it is just immediately clear where the student is going, immediately clear where the point is, and if I need to read in depth at any particular point, I can. I can just see it, I recognize it right away when I read the title, see the subheadings, glance at the thesis statement, and I'm done. If it's not written in this format, it can take me anywhere from 20 minutes, an hour. I was joking with one student once that it took me all weekend to figure out his paper, because he got into such complicated language with this engineering description he was trying to explain. Why do you want to make your reader work hard? You don't. Just to punish them because of all those hours you spent reading political science when you were an undergrad, or economic theory. Now, let's make it easier on our reader, especially me. So if there's 20 of you in your class, 20 of you in this class, if I can take 30 seconds to grade each person's paper, that'll take me 10 minutes, and then I'm good. Now, if I have to take a little bit longer than that, that's fine. But I mention that because, not just because grades are important, but because that clarity that I will see when I grade your paper is the same clarity you want your manager, your colleagues, everyone else to see. All right, any questions? Yes, Said.
I note that all of them, the last sentence reiterates the first sentence, the topic sentence, so is that part of it too?
Oh, the last sentence reiterates the topic sentence?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to. You may see some of that in writing, and that's okay, but it doesn't necessarily have to. As long as you're clear about that topic sentence, it gives you permission to do so much. Yes, Alex.
There's no conclusion paragraph.
Right. There's no conclusion because you don't need a conclusion because you've been so clear with the way you've written this. So if your reader needs to read a conclusion after all of this, you might be in trouble. Other questions? Yes, Leigh.
So in a speech, people need a conclusion. So in writing, you don't have to have it.
No, we do. We're calling a conclusion in writing thesis. You can think about it as the same thing. A thesis is pretty much the same thing as a conclusion. A thesis is another word for a conclusion. It's the takeaway. It's
In terms of structure, many stories have a ton of the conclusion and the end. But in the thesis like this, you don't need the little short paragraph to summarize everything. But typically in speech, we have to have
okay. In speech, we will often at the end of our presentation say in conclusion. Yeah, and we talked on the first class that at the end of your presentation is a good time to do that. At the very beginning of your presentation is also a good time to say the conclusion I'm going to present today is this, because your audience is paying attention. Yes, we will often do that during a verbal presentation. In writing, you will still have a conclusion. We're just going to call it a thesis. You will still have a central thing that you're saying, a main point, a reason for writing that memo. The same way that you need to have a reason for getting up and giving a presentation. You need a reason for writing that memo. It all has to be there. The difference, and the thing I think you're asking about, is in this format, I don't ask you to list the conclusion at the end with a bulleted, bolded word that says conclusion. The reason is because this format should be so clear already. I mentioned if I see a paper that's written effectively in this, it takes me 30 seconds to figure out what the writer is trying to say and give them 10 out of 10 points and move on to the next one. Because the title is going to give me context. I'm going to glance through the thesis paragraph. I'm going to see the thesis right away. It's going to be reinforced by the subheadings, which are in the same order as the thesis. And each of the subheading paragraphs is going to have a topic sentence, followed perhaps by more in-depth explanation. Is that making sense? All right. So you will have an assignment due next week, written conclusion assignment. I think I should maybe reword this to written thesis assignment. So conclusion, thesis, same thing. Written conclusion assignment, written thesis assignment. Write an essay that states and supports the conclusion of your choosing. We can brainstorm some ideas right now, but you can probably guess what I'm going to say. Whatever conclusion, whatever thesis you want, I'm going to say that's a great idea. As long as you can support it with 2 or 3 subheadings and fill that out. 1 page or less. So think about how you can concisely say that, less than 1 page. Don't feel like you need to make this longer. We're trying to think about how we can make your point concisely in fewer words. Use this framework. Yeah, that's it.
Single space.
Yeah, single space is fine. Other questions? Yes, Alex.
How many subheadings do you stick to?
I would say 2 or 3. Yeah, it's hard to. So think about each subheading. It's a branch supporting your thesis. If you have 6 different points supporting your thesis, it's going to be hard to manage. That sounds like a complicated idea. I'm not saying you should never have complicated ideas, but this is the type of writing where you can boil it down to 2 or 3 main supporting pillars. Other questions? Okay, fantastic. So let's move on. What is this? Okay. Yeah, so we're going to move on to our corporate change memo assignment. And how I want to do that is I want to open up the syllabus and explain that assignment to you. We'll discuss the scenario, think of some ideas, and then I've got maybe 10 or 15 slides of content where I will flesh out how we can accomplish the things we decide we need to accomplish. All right, so this is going to be an assignment that will be due in 2 weeks. I wanted to space it out so you don't have both the written conclusion and the corporate memo due in 1 week. But you could do them after this class. You could do them both. You're not going to learn anything between now and then that's going to change how you write this corporate memo. We're going to do that all right now. Question, Renee? Yeah. Is
Or
there
not the syllabus, but
the class slides? Michelle's got it? Oh.
I'll take one too.
You too? We good? One? Okay. I'll get some. Tried a new strategy of having them in here. Sure. Okay, got it? Everyone got it? Okay. Oh, sorry. You were so unimposing when I walked by. All right. Corporate change memo, I'm on page 6. You can just listen or read along, whichever you prefer. So, you are a senior manager for Bank First, a large retail bank located in New York City. Your company has just acquired Mini-A-Bank, a medium-sized bank headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Mini-A-Bank has 20 retail branches around Minneapolis and almost 800 employees. The acquisition was very important for Bank First because Bank First wants to gain a foothold in the Midwest in order to diversify its customer base. You will be in charge of transitioning Mini-A-Bank into fully incorporated branches of Bank First. It is of paramount importance that the transition goes smoothly in the eyes of the Minneapolis customers, because if the customer base shrinks as a result of this change, the Bank First investors will have serious doubts about the company's ability to expand. During the transition, you know that roughly 20% of the frontline bank tellers, loan officers, and other customer service personnel will lose their jobs. Additionally, roughly 80% of senior managers and the staff at headquarters will lose their jobs. Your task is to write a memo to all Mini-A-Bank employees that will calm the employees and help the transition go smoothly. Because you want to gain the trust of the employees who will remain, you want to be as honest as possible in the memo. So, you, as a senior manager of Bank First, have just acquired, or your company has acquired, this bank in Minneapolis. You know that there's going to be some layoffs. 20% of the frontline people, 80% of the senior managers. You need to write a memo that will calm and help calm the employees and help the transition go smoothly. And you want to be as honest as possible to gain the trust of the employees who will remain. So let's think about how we are going to approach this. What are some goals we might employ in this task? What are some strategies we might use to accomplish this?
Don't beat around the bush.
Yeah, don't beat around the bush. Be straightforward. Yeah.
sensitive.
Sensitive at the same time. Yes. What else? Right. Okay. Optimistic. Optimistic, perhaps to a point, or a realistic point. Optimism in a way that's justified. Any other ideas? Nick?
I would give a summary of the actual merger and not send an email that everyone's about to lose their jobs to install this type of panic. So I would say, here's some of the details of the merger, and there's going to be changes in the organization. But I wouldn't want to assume hammers coming in.
Okay. So we definitely don't want all the employees to panic. That is key. That is paramount. And I like your strategy of explaining the merger a little bit. Perhaps that might make them feel part of the process, part of building this company. Jameson?
You always mention that key personnel will have a place in the future organization. Everyone thinks they're
Everyone thinks they're, okay, stroke their ego a little bit. Everyone thinks they're a key personnel. Good, Mike.
Maybe mention the values of the bank first and make it like a company they want to work at.
Yes, I like it. Michelle?
I think it's important to give just a brief overview of the plan and milestones so they know what to expect next
Yes.
and what is the timeline you're working with.
Yes, that I recommend you make some decisions about that. Think about the timeline. Think about what your current, now new employees need to know about how this process is going to work. That information is going to calm them down, prevent a mass panic, and they'll potentially need some of that information. You need to know how this process is going to work. Is it going to be a merit-based layoff? Is it going to be a seniority-based layoff?
Just reading the last sentence, are we in the assumption that the employees already know they're going to get laid off? And it says that we want to try to calm them and help. That means they're maybe already panic is kind of
I guess I wouldn't assume that they already know.
So it's first.
Yes, you're the one who's going to tell them. They might be worried. This big bank in New York has just acquired us, so people might be a little worried about what's going to happen, and they might assume that there'll be some layoffs. And another thing, I guess I forgot to mention in response to the last comment, is that at the end of this, a good chunk of the frontline people, 20%, are going to be gone. And almost all of the management, 80%, they're going to be gone. So generally, when I grade this assignment, I feel like the ones that are most successful give something of a realistic picture of that happening. You don't have to say exactly how it's going to happen, but you don't want to paint a picture that nothing bad is going to happen, it's all going to be great, and then 2 months later, you've got, with this memo, nothing bad is going to happen, but half of that, or almost all the management's gone, a good chunk of the tellers are gone. There were some other comments? Michelle?
Point, is it okay, well, I don't know if it's okay now, but perhaps to say something where as we are looking into resources from both companies and both banks, there is a possibility as we merge the resources that there's going to be shift in need or something like that, and sourcing layoffs.
Yeah, there's the possibility. I advise people to be careful about that because you know pretty specifically what's going to happen. So if you make it sound vague, like there's just a possibility that this might happen, and the employees look back later, it's like you knew exactly what was going to happen. I don't trust you anymore. Jim.
So sometimes in companies, there's like a severance package, there's some sort of like, we want to talk about
Yes.
that.
Yes. If that's appropriate, then you can say how the severance is going to work. I think that's a great strategy. Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to actually build on what Jim said, making sure that the employees who are laid off feel like we helped them while they were employees, telling them, have a discussion with your manager. We have resources now at HR to help you, in the next 6 weeks of preparation, just so that we're not just leaving them out.
Yes. And what I would say is if you open up that door, make sure that it's complete with the way that you address it. What I would not recommend you do is open up that door a little bit and say more information to come or come by my office if you have further questions. And then on Monday morning, you're going to have 600 employees knocking on your door. You're going to have people say, yes, of course I have further questions because you didn't tell us anything. Say?
Just a question about take volunteer buyouts first. So whoever wants to take it, talk to your manager, see if they'll let you do the volunteer buyout. We're not letting everyone go, but some people can take those. And then if we reach this number, then there won't be layoffs. If we haven't reached that number, then there's going to be forced layoffs. So
Okay.
is that long-term?
I think that's great. I think that's fine. If you want to communicate it that way. And I don't see any problems with that. I guess the only thing is, if I'm reading this and there's something that just doesn't make sense about the way you're presenting it and is going to either lead to confusion or just obviously looks like a bad strategy. And when I say obvious, meaning like I can say, well, in paragraph 1 you said this, but paragraph 2 you said this, so that doesn't make sense. That's the only reason you would lose points. You're not going to lose points because I would say, oh, voluntary doesn't work. But if you want to try to practice presenting that version, great. Other questions? All right, great. So I wanted to talk about that first, and we're going to go through a similar discussion, but I wanted us to have that context that our goal is to think about how we could write a memo such as this effectively. And the first thing I wanted to mention is just a quick formatting on emails and a quick formatting on memos. And of course, I know you receive hundreds of emails a week. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or tell you anything you don't know about memos. I just want to make a few points about how the structure looks different and how that lends itself to a slightly different type of writing that we're going to do with the memo compared to the email. So an email is typically less formal. And the other thing about an email is that it is interactive. When you send an email, you will often expect a response. When someone receives an email, they'll think that they can respond and get more information. Contrast that with a memo, which is designed to stand on its own. There may be further discussions, but the memo should have all the information this employee needs to address a particular situation without too much in-depth discussion. So we look at our memo. We've got the more of the less formal, dear so-and-so. We've got our sincerely. We've got our signature at the bottom, designed for an interactive communication event. Contrast that with our memo, where we have all the information about who we're writing to, who it's from, what the subject is, the date, letterhead, all above the subject, all above the body all above the body. So this part here, you may use various techniques to try to make it engaging to your audience. You may use sympathetic language. It may be somewhat on the less formal side, but because of the way it's presented, it's designed to stand on its own. And I mentioned earlier, you don't want 600 employees knocking on your door Monday morning because they don't understand, because you've left something to be said in this memo. Okay, that is all I really wanted to say about that. Writing emails and memos. I want to talk now about strategy. Strategy for attacking a problem like this. If you're going to write a corporate change memo about layoffs, whether you're writing an email and memo, I'll always advise you that you're writing for a certain business need. You want your audience to know something, you want your audience to do something, maybe you want your audience to feel a certain way. So that's the reason you're writing this memo. That's the reason you're writing this email. You might want to be sensitive to your audience, but I'll make the point here that you're only being sensitive to your audience to accomplish a business need. If it fits with your business need, then you can think about using some audience sensitivity tactics. So there you have it. Your communications instructor tells you don't be sensitive to your audience unless there's a pressing business need. That's the way I like to teach this material. I'm not saying you shouldn't be sensitive, you shouldn't try to be sensitive, but let's think about why and how we can use that effectively. So for a business need with writing an email or memo, I mentioned your audience might need to know certain information, your audience might need to do certain things. In the example we mentioned, the corporate change memo, what kind of things do you think your audience needs to know, or what kind of things might your audience need to do after reading this memo? Daniel? Yeah, and we can just repeat some of the things we talked about. I'm not trying to reinvent, I'm not asking for anything else necessarily. I just want you to put this in the context of this assignment. When this layoff might happen, options, severance packages, if that's something that you're going to open up. What they should do in the meantime. Should they keep working? Should they try really hard? Because it's going to be a merit type of situation, judgment-based type of layoff. Okay. Need to do. I guess it's the same thing. Need to know, need to do. Need information about how this is going to work, and how they should respond accordingly. In addition to your audience maybe needing to know something or needing to do something, you may want them to feel a certain way. You may want them to feel good about this change. You may want to persuade or assuage the audience. This word assuage I chose very carefully. It means to make the best of a bad situation. To assuage your audience. That unfortunately this is a difficult situation, but let's think about how we can make the best of it. And I put this under business need because you may need to do that. To make your audience feel a certain way to accomplish your business objective with this memo. And we already talked about a few of those things, but let's talk about a few more. What ways might you need your new employees to feel differently? In what ways might you need to persuade them to have an emotional feeling about this layoff? Or assuage, persuade? What are some of the things you might want them to feel? Mike?
Still want them to feel good about Bank First because a lot of them are staying.
Yes.
They work hard.
Well, good about Bank First because a lot of them are staying. And even the ones that are leaving. You still want them to feel good about Bank First. Not because you are necessarily a nice person, but because you have a pressing business need. I responded to one student who completed this assignment last semester. I said, wow, that was a great memo. I hope when I get laid off, you write me the memo about how I'm going to get laid off. Because I felt so good about the way this company was presenting itself that she was representing. So you want them to feel good about the company for perhaps a good pressing business need. Anything else? Yeah.
That their previous work's appreciated?
Yes. Yeah, I've been working here 20 years, and all of a sudden you fancy folks from New York are coming in, and you're just going to say it doesn't matter? Say my years of seniority? You're going to go by some whatever? Good. Hey, Marilyn?
I feel like they could still trust you
Yes.
in
Yes.
whatever happens.
This is key, and this is what I will, if anything, I will take a point or two off for, where there are clear things where I can say, well, in paragraph 1 you said this, but in paragraph 2 you said this. Obviously they can't trust you. Or the other issue we talked about, where you're presenting a rosy picture of something, and we know that something bad is going to happen fairly soon. So we want to instill that trust, keep that trust. We're not instill in our new employees and build that relationship with trust. Guess we've covered a lot. Anything else we want to fill in about how we might want to persuade or assuage before we move on to actually how we're going to do that? All right, let's move on to how we're going to do that. So how are we going to convince our audience, make them feel good about this company, make them feel that their service is valued? What sort of tactics are we going to use to create that audience sensitivity? If you're going to write this memo, what might you try. Feel free to look at the slide and tell me it was your idea. That's fine too. What's that?
It's not there on the paper.
Oh, you can't see it?
It's just like a couple bars.
Oh, all right. Well, good. Good. All right. Sorry about that. So, yeah.
I think the whole tone of the memo needs to be at least in a positive, team-oriented manner. So
Okay.
we're excited about the outlook. There's going to be significant changes. There might be hurdles or obstacles. Something to let you know we're going to get through it. Whoever we is at the end of the day.
Okay. I like your idea of positive tone. Don't be negative unless you have to. I mean, you can be realistic, but be positive if possible. Okay. Show understanding. Show that I understand this could be a difficult time. I understand that you've worked here 20 years. It's a good technique. Illustrate consideration. What do I mean by that? Okay. All right. I won't ask you to read my mind. I just wanted to see if I could get some other folks sharing their ideas. What I mean by illustrate consideration is explain that we thought this process through carefully. We tried not to think of a strategy where we would lay off so many people, but this is the way that makes the most sense. And it might be great if your audience reading this could say, if I were in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. I know you thought carefully about it. Unfortunately, it's tough, but I can see that you considered the options carefully. Same thing with explain rationale. Why not? Why not explain to your audience why you're doing it? Maybe it's a corporate secret. Usually it's not. Explain what you did from a business standpoint. There's a polite, sensitive way that you can explain that. This is what makes sense. Be truthful. What do you think about this? Truthful. Is there ever any reason when you might want to say a little white lie in a memo? Anyone want to maybe make a case for that? I could be open to it. James?
You want people to stick around in the intro. Work so they see it done. You don't want all the top employees to bail and take other positions at other companies in the meantime.
Okay, fair.
You don't want to get sued.
Okay, sued. So if you're too truthful, you could get sued.
Have motivations beyond what the letter says. Not just their business ethics, ironically, but there could be some things going on that you can't really come out and say in a memo, but people know that they need to occur. Like you may have someone who's problematic. You may find that you have a department that's causing a lot of problems, and by doing this, you can just eliminate the entire department and the guys will lay off. Because I know a lot of companies they do these sorts of things.
So they eliminate an entire department to get rid of one person?
No, not to get rid of one person, but if you have a really bad culture within the department,
Okay.
or like a division, they'll find a way to just get rid of the entire division rather than trying to clean house and deal with all the terminations because of the laws for getting rid of people. Sometimes it's easier
Okay.
to just straight lay off a department than to try and justify why they're letting go a bunch of employees who have gotten okay reviews and poor management for 20 years. I'm not saying I agree,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is that it's the reality of business, and I don't trust most corporate memos. There's motivations beyond what the letter should.
Okay. All right. Okay, so you don't trust most corporate memos. All right, could we do a thought experiment where if you did trust a memo from a corporate person, would that make you be more inclined to like that company, more inclined to work harder? Would that be a positive thing? And what would it take to get you to trust? So 2 questions. Would that be a positive thing, a goal worth achieving? And what would it take to get there?
I think it would be a goal worth achieving, but the question is, so if you're laying people off, it's like if a cop's writing you a ticket, you're not going to be like, damn, thanks for writing me that speeding ticket. Even if you deserved it and you knew you were wrong, you're never going to be happy about the fact that you now have points, whatever it is, right? There's no sugarcoating a speeding ticket. There's probably no sugarcoating a layoff. And so, is all very valid. Like you want to try and minimize the impact, but like my companies, they sent out a memo about like a smoking policy.
Okay.
And, like I was reading it, and I don't smoke, and like very few people do, but I can't help but feel like the only rationale for this policy was the bold thing on the bottom that said like failure to comply could lead to termination. Like are they trying to get rid of certain people? Like, it's just like bizarre and like.
Or they're just like the whole point. They could have just put that in the memo because they want to be able to say that they said it. Is that it? And so we're gonna write you 3 paragraphs of audience sensitivity, but the only thing we really care about telling you is that we could fire you for this.
Honestly, like that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Well, so what's a more truthful way they could have framed that or said that?
Straight up say we have a problem with people leaving the building too frequently for cigarette breaks, so we're trying to make it difficult for you to smoke on premises. Or say, look, we're saving money on our health insurance by having this compliance program where we like, force people from smoking. But when I read that and the people at lunch read that, we were like, wow, like they're not concerned about my well-being.
Oh, okay. Could they have just said it the way you said it? Like, did you hear the way he first said it? Or we're having a problem with people leaving too much because they're smoking, and also we get a break on health insurance if people don't smoke. So this is what we want to try to do.
But if you're a smoker, wouldn't you feel singled out? They're like, wait a minute, I'm doing my job. Like, it's getting done well. I'm a salaried employee. They shouldn't be tracking how much I'm impact the building as long as I'm meeting my goals and objectives. Like no matter which way you slice it, like someone
But-
who smokes is
but-
not
We have
Could-
a memo.
Yeah, but I mean, could we
80% are going to get fired.
could we criticize Saeed because he's leaving the building too much to play video games? I mean, could we say that leaving too much is a problem anyway?
But it's like a work from home policy, right? Like you could say like you're never here, what are you doing? But if your job's getting done and it's getting done well, like what does it matter if you're working from
Okay,
home?
so why do you need to? Why is it a problem then? Why is people leaving the building a problem? You said it's not a problem, right?
You said it was a
I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it's kind of like why would they have just come out and said?
Oh, okay. Well, I like where we're going with this because when you think about how to say things honestly, I think you can get into a discovery just like this. Maybe we just discovered that it wasn't a problem. That people leaving the building frequently wasn't a problem because of the reasons you gave me. So maybe they don't need to tell the employees that, that's an issue. So that just leaves the healthcare savings potential.
So they raise our premiums and say like what's going on? Like either way, no matter which way you look at this memo, it seems ridiculous.
I think we're making some progress, aren't we? Aren't we? Now all we need to do is think of a sensitive way to say that, that there's this healthcare premium issue. And we don't want you to pay more. So let's stop smoking. Or, the truth has always been important to me. I brought the Midwestern work ethic to work. And if somebody lied to me, I would just flip out and never trust them again. And I did sales for a while too, and that's an interesting culture of truth, where I always try to think of a way, how can I say the truth where it's definitely the truth in a way that is going to be sensitive and is going to keep my audience engaged with me. And there was also a culture that permeated people who were salespeople in this company, that if you try a closing tactic on someone else that's not really true, they just flip out at you because using sales tactics on salespeople just drives them crazy. James?
Yeah, you mentioned that it's hard to sugarcoat a speeding ticket. One thing I've seen with a lot of officers is that they present a worst case scenario and they give you a slightly better one. I'll clock you for going 20 over, but I'm going to bump it down to 14. So you feel like even though it's a bad outcome, it's not as bad as it could have been. So
Yeah.
relatively, it's okay. It should have been a $300 ticket, but I'm only getting off 120.
Okay. Yeah. When you see the flashing red lights, you're good news, sir. You're not going to jail.
Yeah, so it's maybe done to a certain memo like this. Ideas were played with, including the complete dissolution of the company. But we found that we could definitely maintain key personnel
Yes.
and make it
Okay, so maybe you might need to allude to how bad this situation could have gotten. I think that's a great tactic. Fabulous. Say.
One point I want to say about truthfulness doesn't mean you have to give all the details, everything. It just means you have to be truthful in what you're saying. Example, like when we did a round of layoffs, they said, we're doing these layoffs to strengthen the company so that we can move forward and be more agile and stuff. But for us who really knew why they were doing it, there was union employees. They couldn't just fire individuals, so they had to basically fire the whole group in order for them to be able to hire more qualified people. Basically, they have like a certain level of expertise. They want to be able to hire a higher level of expertise.
Okay.
But in order to do that, they couldn't just fire individuals. So those who really knew understood that, but the memos never said them. The memos just said we're trying to be more agile, we're trying to move forward and be more dynamic company. So,
Or maybe you could even add in within the regulations that we have. This is the process that we agreed to go through, and we're going through it in this manner. You could just even kind of shout out to the union regulations that way.
Nothing creates calmness like, we're firing you all, but you can reapply for your job. I mean, that's what you're saying, right? Because that's what happens. Let everybody go, let them reapply because some are qualified, some aren't.
I wasn't speaking to that point, but I was saying that because there's these union regulations that we can't fire specific people, we have to fire everyone. Say this is the situation we have. And we followed union procedures, and this is how we're going to make the best of it. I see we're firing you, but you're welcome to reapply. We could talk that through. Think about how we could couch that. Just anyone else has comments or anything? Lay?
My experience, I see a couple of times when the company wants to let a group of people go. So the company just say, because of the business reason, we have to publicize. That's it. It never goes to the media, but everyone knows the reason. But the company announcement just never goes to the media. Okay, they just say, we will take care of everyone. We'll get pretty good package.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So
Yeah.
I think, if we talk about too much detail,
Yeah, I think saying a business reason and leaving it at that is much better than saying something where your audience is going to say, that's kind of a lie, and I might be able to sue you for that.
I think that falls under too, where they actually need to know. Like, you don't want to tell them a whole long, drawn-out story and make it just a wordy document. Here's what you need to know. Here's what's happening.
Great. Need to know. Don't waste their time on top of it. All right. What else do I have? Offer alternatives. I think we've talked about some severance packages. If you have alternatives, why not explain them? You can reapply in 6 months. Buffers. What are buffers? No one's heard of buffers? Okay, a buffer. So I have something to tell you, like you're going to get fired, but I start out by saying, hey, you're looking great today, David. And I tell you you're fired. And I say, I hope the wife and kids are great. So I've buffered the bad news with a positive and a positive. Has anyone heard that before? A sandwich? Compliment sandwich? Yeah. I've heard a different term for sandwich, but compliment sandwich, yes. So my thinking on that is only if you can deliver that sincerely. If I truly think you're looking great today and I truly hope your wife and kids are okay, then I can say that. And you'll say, oh, all right, Zach fired me, but I could tell in his voice that he cared about me and my family. If I can deliver it that way, then I say a buffer is all right. But if it's obviously just something to set you up, you're listening, where's the bad news? Where's the bad news? I don't trust this person. In fact, I want to punch him in the face. Only if you can deliver a buffer sincerely, use it. If not, I say don't use it. The one time I found buffers to be effective is when I was dealing with employee disciplinary issues, and I had to discipline an employee or write up an employee for whatever reason. But I wasn't firing that employee. And I also wanted to distinguish the thing they did that was a mistake from why they're staying here and why I think they're a great employee and why I want to work with them to make them better. And in those situations, I was able to truly say that. Like, I think you're a great employee. I want to keep this going. I like the way you've done this, this, and this. If that's true, say it. Use it as a buffer. And if you can't say it sincerely, do not use buffers. Indirect rejection. Okay, this is a tactic. Instead of saying, no, you can't have an insurance policy for 1 month, you could say, unfortunately, our shortest insurance policies are for a year. So I didn't say, no, you can't have it for 1 month. I said, all right, our shortest insurance policies are for 1 year. As long as it's clear, without saying no, just giving an indirect way of saying, unfortunately, that option is not going to work. Does that make sense? This is a technique you could use to be more sensitive to your audience. Last one, adjust audience emphasis. What I mean by this, if you're praising someone, emphasize the audience. Use lots of words like you and your and their person's name. If you're praising that person, make it all about them. You did a good job. Your team. Your leadership. If you're saying someone needs to develop, or you're saying someone didn't do something as well as they could have, don't emphasize that person as much. Perhaps you might emphasize the team. Emphasize the fact that this project didn't get completed. That this project came in over budget. That there were problems with the decision making. Let's think about how we can change that. Instead of, you were late on this project. You came in over budget. You're the one who couldn't make decisions. So adjust audience emphasis. Positive, adjust for the audience. You, your. Negative, then be careful about very clearly and poignantly addressing the person directly. Make sense? I've used that technique. I feel like I've gotten good results. Emma? Oh, great.
Tell your feelings about you. Like, I feel, I want this from you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I work in a pain management clinic.
Oh, wow.
So I have a lot of like really tough conversations with a lot of really tough people every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that I've cut the word unfortunately and I'm sorry out of these conversations.
Okay.
Because I feel like it's leading your audience to be disappointed. Like they hear that word and like something clicks in them, and they're like, I'm gonna be angry at you now. Like you're messing up my life now.
Okay.
So yeah, I feel like it opens that door for them to be upset with you. Also, it kind of feels like insincere sympathy. Like it's the word you say when you're trying to be sympathetic, but you're not expressing real sensitivity.
Okay. Let me, to play devil's advocate, let me throw out a couple of ideas. What if you really do feel sympathy? Like, it's unfortunate. I wish it weren't so, but here's the situation. What if you can deliver that sincerely?
I feel like saying I wish it weren't this way is the problem with unfortunately and I'm sorry, but it's kind of cliche. It's like the easy thing to say. You say it without thinking about it.
Okay.
That's why I feel like it's a trigger for my audience.
Okay. And one thing I'm going to throw out in a minute is that sometimes if you frame bad news, then it can be received better. What I want to say is sometimes surprising bad news is received in a worse fashion. So surprising bad news can be received especially poorly. Does that make sense? So sometimes words like unfortunately might be able to not warm up your audience in a good way, but make sure they're not surprised. Let me
usually responding to a question, and they usually know what the answer is.
Okay. All right. Well, let me present that, and I've got some subject line examples which we'll think about, and then we'll circle back on that. Did you have something quick, Nick?
No, if you
Subject lines. So I want you to think about how you're going to deliver this corporate memo with the content, but I also want you to think about a subject line. Some quick best practices on subject line. In this class, you hear me say conclusion, conclusion, conclusion. But in the subject line of a memo or a email, we typically want the topic so that your audience understands what the memo is going to be about. Just the way we frame it. Just the way it's easier for your audience to understand. You want your subject to be relevant to your audience. The more relevant the subject of an email or a memo is, the more likely your audience is to open it. The more you can describe why it's important to them in the subject line, the better. At the same time, you want to be as concise as possible. Lengthy subject lines have a lower chance of being open. So as relevant as you can be, but still be concise. Frame surprising bad news. Studies show, in a textbook I read when I first started teaching communications, that surprising bad news can be received especially poorly. Let me give you some examples. Subject lines. See what you think about these. Are these good ways to present a subject? Good subject lines? How about that? You didn't get the job. Just hit them with it. They don't even need to open up the email. It's efficient, right? You got the better job. Oh, how about? I used to put an example up there. Instead of you didn't get the job, I put in the subject line, things work out for the best. And that always got a laugh. Yes. All right. This is a better way to frame surprising bad news. Interview follow-up. And they're like, oh, maybe I didn't get the job, maybe I did, but I'm prepared for it, at least somewhat, if it's going to be bad news. All right, subject line. I'm just making the point here that this actually is relevant when I talk in more depth about emails, but the point I wanted to make here is more specific. If you send someone an email that just says notes at the top of it, maybe they'll know what you're talking about because they have notes. You just meant them in a team meeting and they know exactly what it's about, but maybe they forgot. And maybe it's not as relevant to them as finance committee notes, September 21st, 2015. More relevant, or you can make it more likely it is to be. Okay. Subject line example. Tell me what you think of that one. Elevator out of service January 12th and 13th. Pretty good? Now it is bad news, right? Potentially? But it's not that big of a deal. So you don't need to sugarcoat it. It may even annoy your audience. What's that? Well, they need to know not to come to work on the 12th and the 13th. They work from home or something. All right. How about this last one?
That's good because it's so important that you want to make sure that they know that that's going to happen. Because you just put some generic title, they don't read it.
And then they're surprised January 1st when they turn on the shower.
That's a big, it's the middle of the winter.
No hot water in January? Okay, fair point. The comparison I like to draw is this elevator out of service is not so much of a big deal. This no hot water in January, you might need to warm your audience up because this could be especially surprising, especially painful when you hit them with this in the topic of an email. Okay. You will be graded a couple points for your subject line, a couple points if you accomplish the business need, and the audience sensitivity, simply because that's going to be important to your business success. You want to think about how you can deliver this information in a sensitive fashion. Any questions? All right, great. I told you it would be a little shorter tonight. Enjoy the sunlight. And I believe next week and the week after we will do 2 sessions of emotional intelligence stuff. We'll talk a little bit about the theory of that, how to have a difficult conversation with someone, and why some of those skills will help us in presenting ourselves effectively. Look forward to seeing you next week.